Welcome to this month's episode of Xero Now. I'm Joe Salvati. I'm very excited to be having a panel discussion on mental health. It's something we don't talk about enough in the community, and especially in our community. So it's great to be joined, of course, by Patrice O'Brien, General Manager of Workplace Partnerships and Engagement from Beyond Blue, Tim Hoopmann, founder of Spinn Business Solutions and a valued Xero partner, and of course, Bindi Edelman, our Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Xero. Thank you all so much for coming in today.
It's great to be here.
Fantastic. So, Patrice, I'll start with you. Can you just give us, from your perspective, a background on what is mental health and what do we mean when we talk about mental health?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question because the term does often get misused. Often when we talk about mental health, what people are really talking about is mental ill health. But if you look at the World Health Organization definition of mental health, it's more than just the absence of an illness. It's about when we're really thriving. So it's about when we're really mentally, psychologically, emotionally well and thriving. So that's, if you like, that mental health is one end of the continuum, and at the other end of the continuum is mental ill health. And the thing about mental health is that it's not one or the other in the way that people often think about it. It's not that you're well or unwell. It is a continuum that people can move up and down depending on what's going on in their life, depending on a whole range of different factors. So mental health in many ways can be quite complex, but the health side of it is what we're all aspiring to be really thriving and really well.
Excellent, absolutely. So, Tim, within your business, what challenges do you find that, of course, in your business and the accounting and bookkeeping industry in general, have faced when it comes to mental health?
I think there are, if you look at the accounting and bookkeeping industry, it's probably twofold. One is that they're small business operators themselves, and they're running a small business and they're dealing with generating sales, they're dealing with teams, they're dealing with their clients, they're dealing with compliance for themselves, and all of the things and all of the challenges that go into running a small business. They're also sitting in an industry that is under continual change, and the continual change has been brought about by technology. And so what they're trying to do is to continue to deliver the great service that they have been for their customers while they've got these continual changes, be they, it might be new products, it might be all sorts of things, changes with the ATO that are all often being borne about by changes in technology. So those aspects often will create greater than normal levels of stress and somewhat anxiety. So they're trying to juggle all of that. Then coupled with that, the second part of it is, as a small business owner running a bookkeeping or an accounting firm, they're dealing with hundreds of small business operators themselves. And those small business operators could be doing incredibly well, which lots of them are. They could be doing okay, or they could be in distress. So they're being impacted by the status of those people's businesses on not only them as an individual, but their teams and their whole practice. So that in itself is very, very challenging, and it's really twofold. Interesting.
So Patrice, coming back to you, what are the statistics telling us about mental health in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think, before we look at the workplace, it's worth looking at the whole of society. So we know that mental health conditions are really prevalent. For example, depression and anxiety, which are the two most prevalent mental health conditions in Australia. We know that right now, today, approximately 3 million people are living with depression and anxiety. And we know that throughout our lifetimes, 45% of us will experience a mental health condition. So, if it's not one of us, then it's someone close to us. So it's there, it's definitely a part of us. How that translates to a workplace setting is that from a numbers perspective, we know that at any point in time, it's likely that in a workplace, 1 in 5 people is likely to be experiencing a mental health condition. And what that can mean can really vary. So some of those people will be people who have got their condition really well managed, they've got really good treatment plans in place, they really know how to look after themselves and manage their condition, and they'll be really thriving and doing really well, and it won't be impacting on them at work or at home or in their lives. Others, though, may be really struggling. It may be a new condition. They they might have new symptoms emerging that they don't really know how to cope with. So, you know, in our work at Beyond Blue dealing with workplaces, we often talk to workplaces who say, oh no, don't worry about it, no, we don't have mental health here. Well, they do, everyone does. So, you know, I think from a workplace perspective, there's a really big driver for workplaces from a human and social reason to be thinking about this and opening up conversations and ensuring people can get the right support at the right time. But if that doesn't float your boat and you want to look at it from a purely business perspective, then there's some really good rationale from that as well. So there's a lot of research that's been done on the return on investment, and one of the really powerful figures is that for every $1 invested in creating a mentally healthy workplace, there's an average return on investment of $2.30.
Pretty good return.
Pretty good,
Yeah.
and that's the standard. If you look at different industries, a lot of the industries, it's much higher than that. And actually that research also found that for small businesses, if you do meaningful things in small businesses, that can be significantly higher. And then I think some other stats that are of interest are some of the societal changes in terms of what employees are looking for. So we commissioned some other research at Beyond Blue that found that having a mentally healthy workplace was second only to pay in what employees were looking for from prospective employers, and particularly for young people. If you're a small business and you're out there and you're trying to attract the best and brightest to come and work with you, then be aware that more and more people are looking for workplaces that create that mentally healthy environment, great culture, great places to work. Employees are starting to demand more of that, and the businesses who can deliver it, I think, are the ones who are going to thrive.
Fantastic. So Bindi, of course, that naturally highlights the importance of your role at Xero, which we all agree is incredibly important. So as head of diversity inclusion, you know, how do you factor in promoting well-being and you know, a mentally healthy workplace into what we do here at Xero?
Yeah, well, my role at Xero is all about promoting a diverse and inclusive workplace, and diversity is all about difference, but inclusion is about how do we create great environments where people feel that they're valued, that they're respected, and they have a sense of belonging, and that they can really be, you know, themselves, bring their authentic self into the workplace. And so, you know, just hearing those statistics, when we know that the reality that many people are struggling or dealing with mental health issues, it's really important for us to create an environment where we can talk about that, where we can support that, and where we can just raise awareness in education. Because at the end of the day, I believe that if you trust and you feel safe to be human, you're much more likely to actually be yourself at work, and that's what inclusion's all about. So for us, we are quite early on our journey. The things that we've been thinking about doing, and we've kind of really used World Mental Health Day to spotlight the issue. So last year we actually, for the global campaign, we asked Xeros to make a promise to look after their wellbeing, and over 150 people participated in that. We asked them to take a photo. It was sometimes big stuff, and sometimes it was just little stuff like stop, slow down, reflect, think about things, maybe do yoga, hang out with my friends more often, you know, take the pressure off myself, unplug a bit, lots of things like that. We've also this year continuing that campaign, so we've got a number of events happening globally, and we're actually implementing a new resource which is all about flourishing at Xero, which is with some tips for individuals and also teams around what could you do to promote wellbeing. We've also been looking just at the impact of stress, so we've piloted some programs which we call Thrive, which is about helping our people understand the impact of stress and also how to identify when it's negatively impacting you in your work, and with some strategies to deal with that. And we're also about to launch some learning and education around mental health for our PX, which is our HR team, our managers and our employees. But just some low-hanging fruit is also things like promoting flexible working, encouraging things like shared lunches, standing desks, you know, mindfulness sessions. These are all things that we encourage. So they're just things that encourage people to really prioritise their wellbeing. And ultimately, what's core to all of this is just driving a culture of respect and fairness, with not having problems around harassment and bullying and those sorts of things, and really encouraging an environment where people treat each other well.
Excellent. So, you know, Tim, you know, as you know, you're running your own business. What did you do to sort of set that culture, and especially as a founder of a business, sort of taking the time to, with all the other things happening, to put that as the forefront of what you do for you and your employees?
Okay, I think a couple of things there. One is first and foremost to put on your HR hat And as small business owners, often there's sometimes just yourself, but when you've got a team, you do have a responsibility, and you need to take that responsibility seriously to ensure that the environment that your team is working in, no matter how big or small it is the best it could possibly be. So that's really, really important. So one of the things, I was fortunate to work in corporate for many years, and I worked in organisations similar to Xero that valued people and teams. So I've taken ideas from there. So one of the very first things is things around policies and procedures. That's as simple as a list of accountabilities or job description or clarity for individuals around what is the expectation to do. And one of the other really, really important things that we used to do is have a monthly one-on-one, and it would be the manager, in my case myself, responsibility to sit with each of my teams separately and talk to them about how they're going. And the very first question I asked was, how are you feeling? Not, how was your work month? How are you feeling? And that's a really interesting question. And most people go to functional, oh yeah, I had a great month, this is what I delivered, but let's get to feelings. And often you will come across issues early on. Values are important in a business. So those sort of things are very, very important. And the second thing that we would do, and I think this is really important, dealing with hundreds of clients, we had a clear engagement letter that had a section on code of conduct. Now, often you'll find that it covers off confidentiality and how we get into this relationship and out and how you're going to pay me and what I'm going to do. But think about it in terms of the code of conduct for how we behave together and how we treat you as the client, but also how you treat myself and my team. It's a very, very important aspect. And then the third section was around sitting in an environment that is being digitally disrupted or there's lots of technology, is making it work for you. I'm a firm believer that if you get hold of that technology and you choose the right systems and apps and products, right cloud accounting software, if you connect all that properly in your business, in some small way they will start to help reduce levels of stress. And it was definitely clear in my practice.
Great. So, Patrice, from your perspective, thinking about some of the practical and sort of proactive changes that small business owners can make, what do you find that when you're working in the community that you recommend for helping with mental health?
I think, so at Beyond Blue we've got a program that targets workplace mental health called Heads Up, and when we first launched it, which was a bit over 4 years ago now, I think we thought we'd done a pretty good job on the small business side of it. And we got some pretty loud and clear feedback that we needed to have a bit more of a think about small business, which was really great. And so we've had, people like Tim and a whole range of people who have given us lots of feedback and have fed into it. And I think one of the things that we hadn't focused on enough was a small business owner, because creating a mentally healthy workplace in a small business is really different to when you work in a big corporate. In a big corporate, you've got amazing resources like Bindi, and you can have whole teams of people who can come in and do it. And for a small business owner, they're trying to manage their books and their marketing and their IT and their website. And then to throw in on top of that, okay, now we also want you to focus on creating a mentally healthy workplace. That's really hard. So the message that we got really loud and clear was, let's focus first on helping small business owners improve their own mental health, because it's kind of like the analogy of when you're on a plane. Like, you've got to put your oxygen mask on first before you help anyone else. Yep. It's kind of the same for a small business owner. How do you get to the point where you can really support your staff if you're not first and foremost looking after yourself? So a lot of our focus around small businesses at this point has now been around how small business owners can look after themselves. And that's, in some ways, it's very similar to how anyone can look after their own mental health. So it's about doing things like, it's really simple, getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising, if you do notice that things are going wrong, getting support, making time in your life to do things that you love. But I think there's some extra things that small business owners can do, and one of them is having a plan. I think a lot of small businesses are incredibly good at planning around, their financial plans and their business plans, But I think one thing we see is that not a lot of small business owners have got a plan around what am I going to do if something goes wrong for me and my wellbeing. So we've got a great tool on the Heads Up website that actually can help you to develop that wellbeing plan, and before you become unwell or start having those signs and symptoms, have some strategies that you're going to put in place, because once you're there, it's really hard to see those things. And then another thing that I think is really important, and this can be part of the plan, is make sure that you've got a network. And that can be your personal network, your group of family and friends. But what a lot of small business owners have told us is really powerful is having a network of other small business owners, people in a similar industry or otherwise, but people who you can go to and say, hey, this is happening to me, and you can connect in with them, because it can be really isolating otherwise. So I think that's really important.
Tim, we actually were speaking prior to our filming today about sort of the communities out there and available, specifically for Xero partners, as those who are watching. Do you want to share some of your experience about how you've sort of seen that develop in the community, and of course, how those watching can get involved if they would like that support?
Yeah, that's really very valid point, I think, and same with what you were saying, Patrice. It really often starts with the business owner looking after themselves first before they can then step out and help others. So one of the things that I love talking about is the positive impact technology has had. So one of the things that I see around that is the growth of groups that you're referring to. So be they communities, be they on Facebook or wherever they are, that have brought together like-minded people. So for example, bookkeepers or accountants or both. So, and we've seen within the industry, companies like Xero with their XeroCon or their roadshows, and many other connected app providers doing a lot of community things that bring people together. It puts them in a place where they can share information. And I think sometimes, and I know for me personally, it's great to be able to do that outside the home. Because once you start to take all of that home, it becomes incredibly stressful, and some of those things can be shared with them, but sometimes they can't be dealt with as effectively home as you can within your peer group. So I think that's good. So there's all of those, and I think the Facebook groups for people that are remote, that can't get involved, they're very, very powerful. And I think over time and over the last 8 or 9 years, we've seen the growth of that, and we've seen the value that has provided to individuals, to bigger companies, and probably one of the most amazing things around that is how people are happy to share. They are sitting in an industry where onlookers might say, well, you're all competitors. But in reality, there's a lot of business to go around, and you're better off helping one another rather than trying to compete with one another. And so what a magnificent environment that is to help manage the stresses that are part of small business.
Interesting. So I guess, Bindi, from your point of view, what are some of the things that you'd recommend for those watching at home that they could sort of take part in? And we've shared some of the things that Xero are doing, and perhaps some small things can be adopted as well.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the challenges I find working in diversity and inclusion, as you sort of touched on, being in a bigger business, people often think, well, how do I do it for myself? How do I translate this into something that's meaningful and achievable? And I'd say the same applies to this area. I think it's about just recognising the limits of your resources and saying, well, what are the things that I think actually are meaningful and achievable? I would say it's just really impactful in terms of your communication, just to communicate to the people you work with that you encourage them to prioritise their wellbeing, and there's lots of ways in which you can do that. I mean, just direct conversations around that. I think, as I pointed to before, I really liked your point about conduct, and I think that's just so relevant whatever size you are, just about being really clear around your values and how you want people to treat each other at work. And so just having zero tolerance for things like harassment and bullying and communicating that is really important. And then I think it's just on a practical level, maybe holistically, just assessing the wellness of your workplace and thinking about, if I don't have a lot of money, what are some of the low-hanging fruit that I could maybe think about? Could I encourage walking meetings? Could I promote more flexible working? Could I be encouraging people more to take breaks and actually use up their leave? Can we put in some standing desks? Can we have some more shared lunches to encourage more interaction? So some low-hanging fruit that might not actually cost you, in all cases a lot, but actually could do a lot in terms of moving people's sort of awareness. And finally, I think the important message is also to recognise that we're not all experts in this, and making sure that you know who to check in with and who you can access for advice. We have EAP services here, so that's one option that people can look into, but you know, the incredible resources that you provide, and just making sure that you know who you can contact if you need to for that information and expertise is really important.
Great. So I guess to wrap it up, Patrice, do you have any other advice on where Xero partners, those watching, can find some more resources?
I think just one thing that I'd love to just say, just picking up on Bindi's point, is that as much as I said before that it can be hard for small business owners to think about how to create a mentally healthy workplace on top of all of those other things they have to do, the other way of looking at it is that it's not that hard, because it is all of those things that Bindi just said. Like, first and foremost, it's just about being good and kind to people around you. And small business owners don't have to, and this is a really important message, they don't have to become mental health experts, and they should not expect to have to. It's about creating an environment where people can come to work and talk openly about anything that's going on, and where you can create that environment and people know that it's okay to come and talk about things that are happening in their lives, then you can normalise those conversations. And then if someone does start talking about feeling a bit down, for one thing, they know it's okay to talk about that in that environment. But for another thing, they know that they can do that in a way that there's not going to be stigma or discrimination. The small business owner or their colleagues don't need to diagnose them, and they don't need to try and provide counselling. In fact, they really shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But what they do need to be able to do is listen, be caring, and then know some resources to point them to. So, sorry, back to your point, Joe. In terms of those resources, it can be really challenging for small business owners because they don't necessarily have access to employee assistance programs that larger businesses do. But the Beyond Blue support service is always there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A small business owner could contact it if they're worried about someone in their workplace and could get advice. You can contact by phone, email or web chat. If you've got young employees, that's a really accessible way for them. And the other thing that you can let people know about is just going to see their local GP, and through that they can access things like a mental health care plan and that sort of thing. And then in terms of broader resources about how to look after yourself at work, how to have a conversation with someone you're worried about, we've got a tool on the Heads Up website that's around how to have a conversation if you are struggling with symptoms, how to weigh up whether you should talk about that at work or not. All of those kind of things, just go to the Heads Up website and there's a huge amount of information. And really important to say, all the tools, resources, e-learning, webinars, everything on that website, it's all 100% free.
So, Tim, are there any additional thoughts that you might have for, as someone from the industry that could help, our accounting and bookkeeping partners watching?
Yeah, so certainly the Heads Up website is amazing and really, really worth looking at from a small business perspective. Secondary to that is there are many, many connected apps within the ecosystem, and I suppose the powerful part of that is often a lot of the research and development and in some cases heavy lifting has already been done, and you need to connect into that. So a really, really good example of that is the connected apps around employment contracts, around policies, procedures, all of that information that you can take and immediately implement in your business so that you ensure that your teams are feeling safe, you've got the right policies in place, you're not kind of making them up from the internet yourself and hoping that they'll stand up. They've been written by legal people, and then you're helping to create this environment that has proper policies and procedures in place for the well-being of your team.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So, Patrice, Tim and Bindi, thank you so much. It's been really fantastic to have this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
That's it for this month's episode of Xero Now. A big thank you to all of our panelists. I found the conversation very interesting. If you want to find out more information about Heads Up and how to use it for both your business or your customers, be sure to check out the link below. I look forward to seeing you next month.